So we've finished assignment 1. Smack bang onto assignment 2.
No.
Let's do it. No. It's okay. Right? Like, just remember that uni is the safety net. Right? It's the safety net. That, I don't know how bad it is. Let's assume it's terrible. Okay? Just let's assume, okay? Hello. That might lose you a job in the future, right? But here it just gets you a pass. So it's a learning experience, yeah? Julia, can you do me a big favour once you've caught your breath? Do you mind going and checking if our room is free? So that we can end this half an hour early?
Oh yeah, sure.
We can wait. So we're on to assignment 2. Now, assignment 2 sees us in the exact same site. Sees us with the exact same film inspiration, but we want to start seeing some residential outcomes. So we're going to spend from now until September dealing with all the holes that I will discover in your scripting by marking this assignment. So Julia and I, really, we're going to use this first assignment to be like, we know where you're at, so that we can really use that as a springboard to teach you guys some stuff. So I'm going to be talking about data trees, to the point where you guys really need to understand that. I talked last week briefly about flipping matrices, but that's nothing compared to actually understanding data trees. We might even start on that today, I think. We're going to talk about, I had someone complain that they don't like Photoshop.
Why?
They said, how do I draw? Now, I don't know if this person's here.
Yeah,
Was that you?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Sorry, I don't read the names of the email, I just respond. You were asking how to do trees. Was that you? No, it wasn't you. It was you were asking how you do trees, how can you draw trees easily, but you don't want to use Photoshop. Yeah, right. So I feel like Photoshop's actually quite fun and easy to use. So we can go over some of those questions to make it actually, instead of you not being a fan, because you're going to have to learn how to use it. It's inevitable. Unless you want to use GIMP. Huh? Paint. Paint's been discontinued. They brought it back.
It's not built in, it's just...
Right. Okay. Well, GIMP, yeah, there's Photoshop and GIMP, and there's a few others. But yes, what I want to see from you guys is a residence design in response to a chosen client. So I'm going to present to you 3 clients. If you guys have something in your head, a client that might be a bit different from these 3 clients, feel free to propose that to me and Julia. But there's 3 core clients, and each of those clients will be adding something very specific to your residence, okay? Otherwise, each residence is going to have to contain what I'm about to list. We need you to finish the advanced Grasshopper course in IDDA. There's a specific deadline in there. To be honest, as long as you finish it by the end of this assignment, I'm happy, okay? Do you guys prefer that, or do you want that? Okay. For those people for Sophie, we can decide what particular IDDA course you complete. You cool with finishing the advanced one? Tom, you cool with finishing the advanced one? Cool. Okay, sweet. And we basically want the exact same thing as what we're receiving today, except we don't need to see these printed off. Okay? So let's introduce the brief. We're looking for 80 to 120 square meters residence on your site. In that, we need a master bedroom, and with every master bedroom, you have an ensuite bathroom, a bedroom for a potential child or guest or whatever, or if two people argue and someone doesn't want to sleep on the couch. It's not free. Damn. Okay. A kitchen, a dining room, a living room, and a toilet/laundry. That's basically it, okay? Now, the last time we gave this class this assignment, we got some of the most typical looking houses ever. So I just want to remind you that even though you're designing this house, I want you to also have in the back of your head that inspiration from your movie, okay? That's going to be something that's going to be traveling with you for every assignment. So those of you who have done something extreme for your cinema, no. Let's start seeing that with your house. Key thing here is there's no cinema, yeah? And part of this experience is actually getting used to your site and doing something different with it. Eventually, you will need to start incorporating your cinema, a new cinema, into this design for the final assignment. But I don't want to see a residence for this assignment sitting on its own with a nice little compartmentalized space for the cinema to appear, okay? This needs to work by itself. And if I see like a blank space like cinema to be built here, that's not good, because the final cinema and final residence, we really want to see those things working together, okay? Cool? The key thing here is that you guys should be scripting to a point where that problem isn't actually going to cause you any issues time-wise, okay? If it does, then I haven't done my job properly. So there are 3 clients. Julia, I was just saying that if the students want to propose their own client, they're welcome to. The key thing with each of these clients is they have a special space that they require in their residence. First client is a director. It can be any director you want. It could be the director of your movie, who knows? The key thing with this is we need 100 square meters of surface area of storage for a film library. Huh? Extra. Now, for a cinema library. When I say 100 square meters of surface area, I'm not talking about floor space. I'm talking about surface area for storing films, okay? I'm about to show you some examples of how people store films. We're talking surface area. So you could think of each line of these as a wall, and that has surface area. That would count towards that surface area, okay? You could do some very cool things with storing film. These are what I would consider quite old school. But when we talk about a library for cinema, we're not just talking about storing the film. Directors care about other things other than just what they put out there. This is an exhibition of Arabic posters for films from the 70s, I believe. This isn't a director's space, but this is, everyone familiar with Adam Savage from Mythbusters? Yeah. So this is his man cave, as he calls it, and he's an avid collector of replicas of props. So when we talk about storing things for your film, it could be this type of storage, okay? We once had someone come in and do a lecture for us who was part of the Mad Max film. And they would he made models of all the vehicles that were in that Mad Max film that were then eventually made in real life. I guarantee you the director of that film has some of those models sitting somewhere in his house, okay? Because there's an immense amount of work that goes into films behind the scenes, and at the end of it, they don't just throw it out. So for those of you who want to pick the director, please consider these types of spaces. I just threw in a very classical idea of what a library is. A lot of people have respected books for a very long time, okay? And everything's being digitized, and we're seeing the death of the library, right? In the most classical sense. Because all of these books can literally be stored in this, right? Like, I'd have to charge it, but every single book here could be stored in here. So even though we're moving into a digital age, I'd like to see you guys start thinking about how can you celebrate film even if it's being stored on a USB stick, or even it's being stored on a server. And that's kind of why these can't really be digitized. They're actual physical things. So we might start seeing libraries that look more like this instead of like filled with books or films. Cool? Okay. The second client is a writer. So sometimes your movies, like for example, Kill Bill was written both by a director and the same guy that directed it was the writer. So there are movies out there that are owned by writers, basically. Like the director doesn't really matter. The person who wrote it is really the source of everything. And the key thing with this is we want to see two spaces. One that they can use as their internal study, and an external space that they can use to contemplate, okay? With writers throughout history, they end up going to very secluded places to write. And if you're living in Ryde, then when you write and you're looking outside, there's more than likely that your hippie neighbour is having some kind of drum circle next door, and there's kids on the other side, and the people living in that residential tower can look directly into your private space, okay? So the key thing here is that we want a space that they can use to set up how they write, and a space that they can be private, but also exterior. And that's a very difficult challenge, okay? Exterior, but private. So we're almost back into libraries again. These are what we would consider typical spaces for writers. But how do you start bringing the external internal? This is a nameless, architectless Japanese house that I found on the internet. One of the directors in my firm saw this image as I was putting it into this lecture, and he's like, "Who did that? What's their name? I can't tell you who it is. If you can work out who this is, tell me, because it's actually quite a nice outcome, right? It's almost to the point where if this, apart from these black lines, you're outside, right? So this is more so some inspiration that you could use. In no way does this have to be what we want to see. It's just to talk about what we want. The key thing here is your writer might not necessarily be solitary. A lot of comedians get together and write together in groups. So how could you use that space to encourage multiple people to come together and write? Okay? And the last client is a stop motion animator. And that would require 32 to 50 square meters of open, changeable space that's at least 2 to 3 stories high. Okay? And I'm going to show you why that's necessary.
Film, you would be shooting that either on the boat itself or another boat with a telephoto lens. So there would always be a little bit of undulation, a little bit of movement. Stop motion, nothing like that. Be still, be not moving.
He wanted me to take a look at what the boats at night, being thrown around by the storm, what that would look like, and taking that motion and copying it and sampling it so that we could get as realistic as possible with how our boat would move through a storm.
The boat is certainly one of the most complex scenes in the film. It's incredibly difficult because you have the boat on a hexapod, so it's moving, doing its thing. You have one character that's on the deck of the boat. You have another character that's on a rig, sometimes 12 feet in the air, and the camera was sort of all over the place. You have all these things that are moving different from one another that you're trying to keep track of frame by frame. So there are a lot of different things at play that made it very, very challenging. But between the cinematography, the incredible stop motion animation that our animators did, and then the editing and the music on top of that, the atmosphere just really crackles with that creativity, where you're all influencing and inspiring each other.
There's something so seamless about it. When technology can marry storytelling like that, it's really powerful.
That is one of the most rewarding and exciting parts of the process.
Oh yeah, and buy the DVD. Make sure you do that. And then the really cool thing about this film is it's got even more examples.
It's very powerful. Your mother used her magic to save you and bring me to life. I'm here to protect you, Kubo. That means you have to do as I say.
I don't know that I was prepared for how difficult it was going to be. So, even, I really took advantage of every job that I've had in this industry up to this point.
This goes for a while. I'm going to skip to the bit that's necessary.
Thematic idea. We're really not doing very much visual development at all. We don't find the story doors.
So the key thing here is that even though this whole entire film is technically a big visual effect, you guys are going to have, you will have seen films throughout each of, even modern films now that use physical effects, and people need versatile, tough spaces to do those physical effects. In this particular movie, I'll try to skip to this bit. They had absolutely massive, even though it's a miniature-based film, here we go. They had absolutely massive puppets as part of that because it was to scale. And if you would actually look at the visual effects within Star Wars, we're not talking about tiny little ships that are like that big. They're blowing things up that are maybe 2 or 3 of these tables long. So those of you who pick this particular client, please give them a space that lets them do things like this, but also give them a space that celebrates it, okay? In no way should this thing be hidden and tucked away and put off to the side. This is something that should be celebrated as part of what they do. And if anything, knowing how they did this stuff makes the movie even more interesting. I feel like there's that, knowing how an artist does their work is quite interesting. So I've got 2. That's basically introducing the next assignment. Does anyone have any questions relating to it right now? Not yet. Yeah?
Do we have to use Grasshopper and Run?
Of course. So just before I even see, yeah?
So these extra spaces for the client, these are extra spaces. Like we have the master bedroom, the
Yes.
section and all that, but there's also a separate section
Yes.
that's unbounded by the 120 meters.
Yeah, no, it's extra on that.
Okay.
So for example, the 50 square meters that you have to provide for the animator, that means your building has to be 150 square meters. Yeah? Okay? So, yes,
Are we given like a Rhino file like the last time?
it's the same site.
Same site,
So the same mesh.
same file.
Same site, same everything. Same movie. So you guys, what we want to see is we're gonna have a look at your site models, okay? And we're gonna give you feedback. So we'll hopefully see some improvement on that site model, okay? So instead of sort of giving you a fresh thing each time, you're gonna see that thing build up to be quite like a big extensive site, okay? We might even give you some neighbors. Neighbors. You're going to get neighbors. Well, okay, so if we think of these three tables as sites, and I was to build a house, in no way do I really, like, there's no neighbors next to me, I don't really care. But now the neighbors are actually affecting our building, right? There's something that's quite intrusive. So for example, if you're trying to make something private and you've got a 3-story building next to you, how do you go about making that private? Okay, so that is something that I will try and introduce this weekend to each of your sites. I'm sorry that it's not completely prepared right now, but it's not like you guys are going to start, until like a week before it's due. So, okay. So, who struggled with using Grasshopper for the first assignment? Everyone? Good. You didn't? No. Okay. Okay. Well, so now he needs to make things harder for himself. Basically, that's what I'm hearing. Okay, so people are having a hard time with it, and that's good. That's a good sign. That means that you've got something's been put in front of you that's challenging you. Okay, do you feel if you were to do this the first assignment again right now, could you get through it faster? Like, let's say you change the design up. Could you actually start? Does it feel like you're getting used to using this stuff? Yeah, okay. So, I was going to try and start the tutorial now, kind of, because I was going to do a scripting workshop. I'm going to talk to you about human or elephant. So do you mind, I'm going to introduce it now and we'll go upstairs and we'll talk it through after you've pinned up, okay? So do you guys mind going and just go download human and elephant from Food for Rhino? Pardon? So these plugins do a few things with Grasshopper, but one of the most, I think, important things that they do is they introduce this concept called geometry pipelines. So, Tim, if I were to draw geometry in Rhino and I want it to come into Grasshopper, what do I have to do?
You have to select the geometry in Rhino and then drag a component into Grasshopper.
Yep.
Just select.
Set multiple?
Yeah, set multiple.
Okay. So that every time someone goes and adds geometry to a set, let's say you've got a cloud of points, similar to what we did with the Delaney system. Let's say you want to add some points or delete some points. Every time you do that, what do you have to do?
Like deleting points in Rhino or Grasshopper?
You delete the points in Rhino. Like let's say I go in and add 100 more points to the system. What would you then have to do? You've already written the script. What would you have to do? You're not sure? You just select the point, all the new point system, and like set that in the parameter, right? You just re-import the points. Yeah? Does that make sense? So if you had, let's say, 10 points, and we put that in the system, is this making sense? Yeah. Okay. So if you got 10 points, and you put them into your script, and then let's say you add 5 more points, you just select the 15 points, right-click the parameter, and say set multiple points, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward, right? But every time you make those changes, every time you add points to the system, you have to go through and right-click and say set multiple points. Yeah. Okay, so what a geometry pipeline does is it allows you to pick points using a rule system. So instead of you going in and manually selecting those 10 points and saying, these are the points I want to use, there are other ways to select those points, okay? So, for example, I'm going to treat all of you guys as points again. Like normal, you're being turned into points. Anyone sitting on the lower level of this system, this room, so there's a step, is on layer 1, and everyone sitting on the upper level is on layer 2, right? Those of you who are male, you have the name male, okay? And those of you who are female have the name female. So you're all points. So I can create a really simple rule system to say, get me all the points on layer 1 with the name female. Which point would I get? Just 1 point. Julia? I'd get Julia as well? Okay, so do one of you three mind just coming and sitting down here for a second? Thanks, whoever. As Romany and Sophie and Zara, so they've all decided to come down, have moved now onto level 1, my system is going to pick up the fact that they've moved on immediately and use those points as well. Is this making sense? Thanks, guys. Thanks for the we want to get fit. Like physical examples are good, I think, aren't they? Yeah. Okay. So, if I can somehow find my mouse. Okay, don't need a mouse. So we can find in human, there is a component called dynamic geometry pipeline, and I will make sure I've got bifocals in here. And in here, there is multiple inputs to allow us to pick geometry. So if I draw straight away in Rhino, what layer is it by default going to go on? Like I've created a new layer. We've got layer default, right? So if, let's say, I want to draw points on layer 02, yeah? So I'm going to type into my panel layer 2. I'm going to grab the type point. And let's not care about names at the moment, right? So now you can see that this isn't actually picking any geometry up because I haven't drawn anything on layer 2. If I then draw a point on layer 2, Ready? Watch this. Watch the magic. It immediately gets brought into Grasshopper. Okay? Did you see me right-click it? Right-click any panel? No? So I can start adding points to my Rhino model, and they immediately getting seen by Grasshopper. Yeah? If I draw these points on any other layer, layer 1 for example, they are not being picked up by that system because it's only looking for layer 2. Okay? Now, this type of coding is going to become very useful for you because you can actually start creating systems that respond to what you're drawing with as you draw it. Okay? The second thing is, the instant you start thinking about this, you have to start thinking in that same way that I was talking last week of how do you code without having to do any extra coding. Okay? So what I'm going to do in class, in tutorial today, is we're going to use this system to take extrusions, or let's say polylines that we draw in Rhino, and we're going to make slabs, we're going to make walls, and we're going to make a ceiling for that instantly as we draw it. Okay? The key thing here is the script that we work on has to work on multiple rooms at once. Okay? So you remember the staircase that we did last week? Remember how we had to pick a line and then we divide that line up and then we move the points and we weave them together and make a stair? If you had to make 2 stairs, how would you use that script? Would you copy and paste it? You would. Okay. So I did a little exercise with Chris and what's your mate's name? Josh, last week. I'm going to get you guys to do that exercise right now. Okay? You're not allowed to say anything. Please, has everyone got Rhino Grasshopper open? Get it open. Except for you, Simona, you've got it open. Good job. Nice forward thinking. Is that a question? They don't have Elefront for Mac. Oh well. Humans okay? Humans working for Mac?
Human UI?
No, it's just human. The guy who made it, it used to be called HDM.
This human, right?
Yep. It used to be called HDM. The guy who makes it, his name's Andrew Hoyman. So, and everyone complained to him about the fact that it wasn't named after an animal, so he changed it to human.
What a complaint.
Huh?
What a complaint.
Well, that's what Grasshopper fans complain about. They were like, your last name's Hoyman, you should name it after an animal, human. Yeah, of course. Whenever Cox has got various plugins in development, and we've named them all animal names. You might as well. The thing is, the fact that you have a university lecturer standing in front of you telling you to go download human, it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? It's brilliant. Okay, so key thing here is I want you guys to code me up. And now you don't necessarily need to code this particular part. I need 2 curves. They can be any shape. But what I want you to do is I want you to divide the curves up and draw lines between those divisions. So equal divisions. I want you to draw lines between those divisions. Okay? Can everyone please do that? Stick your hand in the air once you're done. Whoever's first gets a chocolate bar. Except for you. Huh? For real? Yeah, for real. Go get something to eat. You don't need to see this. You'll find this interesting. Yeah.
It's funny because I didn't use that in my script. There was no use for it at all.
What?
Depressing.
Knowing that?
Yeah.
No, okay, it's fine.
What do you mean?
What do I mean?
What he said, I disagree. There is use for it.
No, don't worry about it.
Use it in my.
You're distracting yourself. You want the chocolate bar, don't you? Okay. Unless you're diabetic, I'll get you something else. Huh?
It was a brownie point.
A brownie point? How about a chocolate bar point? You know what I'm doing, don't you? Yeah. The thing is, for you to draw, like you could make that division 20 or 100 or 1,000, that should just be in a slider, right? Like you can change the amount of divisions there are. It's super easy with that slider, yeah? Yeah. So it shouldn't take you any extra time to do 1,000 or 1. Oh, you missed out on the chocolate bar competition. You get a second chance. Do I need to explain this to you? I need you to draw me 2 curves. You can draw the curves in Rhino. I want you to divide the curves up and draw lines between the 2 curves. The 2 points, list of points. What's that? It's not working? Are you finished? Good job. Now prove it. Huh? Nice.
Is that what you want?
Yeah, could you make them 3D? What's that?
That's it, right?
Very nice.
That's pretty much it.
Good job. Okay. Simona and Eden, you guys drew. Good job. Okay, so now what I want you to do, now this isn't a race, I want you to do a third, I'll just wait for everyone to get up to it. Still put your hand up when you're finished. Zara's finished? Yeah, nonchalant. Yeah, finished. Yes? Finished? Can you tell me, like, is everyone finished? This shouldn't be a very challenging test, right? It's like the most simple thing that you could do with Grasshopper. What chocolate bar do you want? What chocolate bar? Whatever. Okay, so those of you who are finished and those of you who are about to finish, I want you to draw me a third curve and I want you to connect these lines. I want the lines to go for a third segment. Okay, let's do 3 curves. Put your hand up when you're finished. Pardon?
Have they done it properly? The ones that-
No.
What did you say about the third one?
I want you to do a third one, and in the sequence, I want you to put lines that go from the second one to the third one. You finished? That was pretty simple. How did you do it? Pardon?
Make another curve and then use the second as
So but it needs to go from, the lines, you need a line that goes from the first one to the second one, and then a line goes from the second one to the third one. Is that what you did? So how did you do it? Pardon? So you just copied? Okay. So before everyone else finishes, I want you to make that 1,000. I want 1,000 lines, 1,000 curves, like 4, 5, 6, 7. I want you to do 1,000. Is everyone clear with that? Once you do the third one, I want you to do 1,000. It's going to take you a long time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I have a question with this.
Shoot.
So will that only pick up points on that layer, or will it pick up?
It's only picking up points, but you can type BREP, you can type mesh, you can type.
And then it'll pick up that.
Yeah. So who wants to give up? Like who's got to the third line? You've got to the third one? For the next step, I need a third curve, which is divided equally, and I want lines that go from the second set of points to the third set of points. Yeah. So have you started doing 1,000? You have? You're trying. So who has okay, just listen, guys can stop now. Who's drawn this line and drawn the second line, divided it, and then drawn a line from point to point? Who did that? Everyone? Everyone who's taking part, you did that? Okay. Then when you did the third curve, you just copied what part of the system, dividing it equally still, and then you copied the line and you did line from point to point. So you should have 2 line components and 3 divide components, right? Yes, okay. So using that logic, if you did 1,000, you would need 1,000 divide components and 999 line-to-line components, yeah? And as you said, it would take you a very long time to do that. Now, this is kind of where I was getting at last week. How do you code so you don't have to do a lot of work coding? So I'm going to show you the answer to this particular challenge. And this is hopefully the start of you guys thinking much more laterally with your coding, okay? So I'm going to draw my curve. I'm going to copy it. Now the key thing here is I'm going to select these curves and I'm going to work on them in the same component, okay? So when I right-click curve and I set multiple, I'm actually going to put both the curves in the system, okay? So both the curves are there. When I divide them, I'm getting the exact same result as what you got when you divided them in separate components, okay? The key thing here is that they're actually in separate lists, in separate branches. So the first curve has been divided into the first branch. Grasshoppering without a mouse, bad idea. So the first curve goes into the first branch and the second curve goes into the second branch. Yep. Now, last week, how did I explain one way of thinking about branches? Do you remember I drew 2 branches on the board? What is a way that I could be drawing these 2 branches other than just 2 lists? 2 lists on top of each other. How else could I be drawing it? Nah, it's fine. I'm almost done. So here's the first list. Right? How could I draw the second list? Come on. Come on. You don't remember me drawing this type of thing last week? Right? Okay. 1 week memory. Okay. Okay, so what if I were to draw the second list? It's an equal number of components. What if I were to draw the second list as a matrix or a graph? So here's list 0 and here's list 1, right? So right now, if I were to use polyline component on this, I would get a polyline that goes between these points, and the polyline that would go between these points. But if I took this whole system and I flipped it so that you were to treat the rows as columns, 0, 1, 0, 1, when I draw a polyline between them, it's going to go from this point to this point. Okay? So let's do that now. We're going to take the flip matrix, and we see the data now go into branches that are relative to the lines. Okay? So now when we code, we want to draw a line between them, and fortunately, Polyline does that when you have a list. Already, I've written, just for 2 curves, I've already written a smaller script than what you guys wrote using the line-to-line component. Yeah? I think it's almost exactly the same size. Yeah? The key thing here is, if I were to copy this curve and move it up, and then select these 3 curves in order, 1, 2, 3, I don't have to do anything. The script's done. The script finishes the work for me. Okay? So now, just to prove that I can do 1,000 in a few seconds, I'll just pick the first one. I'm going to use a series to move that up. We're going to move that in the Y direction. And we want to move it 1,000 times. So now the script does that 1,000 times. Now I realize that it's simple, I'm just moving something like an extrusion. I could have just drawn those lines in that direction, but this thing could snake around a system. It could be doing anything, right? I can move, you obviously saw me move that off to the side and it worked, okay? But do you guys see where I'm getting at? Did the exercise in terms of doing 1, like 2, 3, and then 1,000 kind of prove why it's useful to know these types of things? Yeah? Okay. So we are going to go upstairs, pin up our assignment, and we're going to use this type of technique to make a system that lets us draw any outline for a room and get walls, slabs, and ceilings. Okay? Cool, let's go do it. Those of you are going straight upstairs right now. I have pins. Who's going straight upstairs right now? Who else? This one comes with a magnet. Yeah. Cool. Let's do it.